to see so many people here. I see some members of the public. Welcome. As you all know, this is a listening tour with VELCO. VELCO and the Commission and its staff will be the participants actively, and the public is welcome to listen and learn, as we will be learning from VELCO about latest developments in the transmission business. My name is Anthony Roisman. I'm the chair of the Vermont Public Utility Commission. With me today are Commissioners Margaret Cheney and Sarah Hoffman, in addition to a number of our staff people. And it appears that every one of them, their name actually appears in the little square. So I'm not going to run through all of them, but they are part of the team of people who are very interested in what VELCO's doing. As you know, these listening tours are primarily for us to hear from you about things that you think we need to know, and things that you think we're not doing that we should do, things that we are doing that you think we shouldn't do. Someone seems to have an additional piece of information to make this work best. If you're not presenting or speaking, you should turn off your microphone, as I will do. The first thing, however, is I'd like to have VELCO introduce all of those of you who are here from VELCO and identify yourself. Who's going to take the lead for VELCO?
Mr. Chairman, why don't I do that? Tom Dunn, I'm the President and CEO of VELCO. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity with us today. We have Dan Nelson, who's the Vice President of Technology and Communications, Carrick Johnson, Vice President for Strategy and many, many other things, Shana Louisel, who works with Carrick, Michelle Nelson, who is our Chief Financial Officer, and I think that's everyone, I believe. Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. Excuse me, Chris. Sorry. Not so good, right? Chris Root, our Chief Operating Officer. So, good morning, everyone. And Carrick, I think are you going to be? I believe Ian said you're going to be driving the slides.
I was trying to, Tom, but for some reason, for this Go to Meetings app, and I should have done this in advance. The long and short of it is, hey, Dan, I just sent you the presentation. Can you drive for this one, please?
Okay, just a moment. Let me make you the presenter.
Nothing
I'm
like
not sure.
TV, right?
Right.
All right, and just the one ground rule, I'm sure you all know this, is that we will not be discussing anything that is a matter pending before the Commission, or that you anticipate bringing to the Commission for any action in the foreseeable future. And with that, we can turn it over to Mr. Nelson. You're now the presenter, so you are in control.
And I'm trying to get to the presentation. I'm sorry. A little delay here. Carrick, you said you sent it to me?
Yeah.
This morning.
I'm sorry? No, not that.
It was this morning.
Yeah, there's just a couple.
There's one small tweak.
So before we start then, I'll ask, you're probably going to go into this. I'd like to hear a little bit about VELCO's take on the FERC Order 2222, about the distributed energy resources, just if you have any thoughts on that. It's probably in your presentation.
It is, I'll go.
Sorry, Carrick. It's not
That's
coming.
okay. Okay. I sent it to you twice. So let me respond to your question, Commissioner. I would say this.
There.
You got it? FERC Order 2222, I think in terms of aggregation of renewable generation resources, a lot of that had been happening anyway as a matter of market forces. We think it'll accelerate, but in Vermont, we're kind of ahead of the game on that score. I think for us, for Vermont though, what it's already led to, and we'll get into this, is the need to, it accelerates a bit the need to understand what renewable sources are where, what kind of resources they are, when they're on and when they're off. So for us, it isn't so much the fact that there's value that's being lost currently in terms of renewable generation and its service. It's if this is going to accelerate as it already is, how do we ensure system reliability even as we unlock additional value? So fundamentally, it revolves around the impact is going to be, we're going to need to continue to get better data on exactly what is going on with these resources. And how do we get that? How do we share that with ISO New England? ISO New England's already made a request of us about how we're going to comply and what role VELCO might play for that. And so I think it's going to be a careful knitting at the data level of exactly what we're aware of, what's on, where it is, what impact it has. And from that level, I think from VELCO's perspective, since we don't play in the market, that'll be the biggest impact to us.
Kara, can you give us some idea of a time frame? During what time period might we see those steps that you just outlined be completed so that the requirements of 2222 start to actually be implemented here in New England?
That's a good question. That largely isn't, and I can defer perhaps to Chris on this, but given he's had a conversation with ISO New England, but Mr. Chairman, at least my reaction would be, we're starting to put things in place now, right now, in planning for that and putting assets in place, getting the analytics in place to be able to respond. When we ask that direct question of Vamsi Chadha-Lavada, the COO of ISO New England, what kind of time frame are we talking? They said, 5 years or so. And we said, well, our response was, in our experience, if you think that's going to be 5 years, and we have to begin to lay the groundwork now to be able to do that. So, as you said at the outset, Mr. Chairman, we are not to talk about projects or issues that are currently before the commission. We are developing, and Dan will speak to this a bit, we do have a large project in place expanding our fiber as a fiber reliability project that will be in part directly in service to helping to meet that need. And so I think ostensibly you will see some kind of application this year for a fiber reliability project that's driven in part, will be responsive in part to that 2222. So what you will see, you will begin to see things happening this year.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Why don't I be Dan's up or why don't I back off?
No, that's a good
Tom,
question.
you wanna-
Dan, if you could advance to the next slide, please.
Okay. And that didn't happen. There we go.
Okay, well, first, I want to just thank the Commission for the opportunity to get together today. It is something that we, really like to do, which is to share with you how things are going at VELCO. Obviously our role as the state's transmission utility is a pretty important one, and there's a lot of dynamic things underway. I'm going to try to cover a number of those things today, but I want to just note that our Deputy General Counsel, Mark Scarata, has also joined. Mark, good morning. And just briefly looking at the agenda, I think we covered the first number of introductions and heard opening comments from the chairman, and I'm covering my opening comments now. Then we'll hear from Chris on sort of operational highlights and insights in terms of things that have happened last year in VELCO. And I want to share with you some information about an event that took place back in June on the VELCO system. Michelle will share with you an update on our financial picture, and then Carrick will talk about some of the operational innovation activities that we have ongoing, and then it'll be followed by Dan, who I think will sort of riff off of the information, some of the information that Carrick is sharing. I think we'll give you a glimpse as to what is going on at VELCO and our system and with the partners and the DUs. Very active area in terms of technology. Shana and Carrick will then talk about how the VSPC has evolved, and then leave some time for question and answers. And just a as we go through this, obviously, I think ideally we have this as an interactive exercise, and if there are questions that we want to talk about at the beginning, throughout the process, please jump right in. I think that'll be the best use of all of our time. So if you could advance the slide. Before I turn it over to Chris, I just wanted to talk about, the approach that we take in terms of how we do our work and how we interact. And that is, our approach is really guided by our mission, our vision, and values. With the mission of being a trusted partner is just so important in terms of how we do our work, that we share information broadly and widely, that we are transparent in what's working, what's not working, being active in our community in terms of making sure we understand what are the needs here in Vermont. Are we doing a good job with our core mission? And all towards accelerating, helping Vermont accelerate towards a vision of a sustainable state, and working, relying on our people, the assets that we have, as I'm talking about the fiber, and how key that has become, and the relationships that we have, and the operating model. It's a kind of unique one in the country, and it really enables us to do some things that I think will help Vermont get to be a more sustainable, state. And then our values. How do we do that work? And you can see the acronym here, acronym TRUST. Again, trying to demonstrate that trusted partner behavior. So. That's guiding what we do and how we do it. I hope we'll provide some feedback on this, on how things are working between VELCO and the PUC. And I hope we get some, if there's some things that we're doing well, that's great. Perhaps we learn more about things that we can get better at. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Great, thank you, Tom, and appreciate the commissioners allowing us this opportunity. I wanted to talk a little bit about, how did the transmission system of Vermont perform, some of the things that are coming down the line also. I wanted to just say that this has been quite a unique year. I've been in the industry 40 years, and I don't think I remember a year that we did more stop starts, reverses, changes, adapt to new rules on the fly. And it was really, I'm really proud of the way the 150 employees at VELCO have adapted to working from home. Our field crews were at home for a while. They went back into the field in a safe manner. In 2020, we did not have a single COVID positive case in 2020. And we also we met our construction objectives, which we set before we had the pandemic. So we were able to recover after a 2-month hiatus from any real field construction going on to make up for it in a safe manner. We did not have a single lost time accident in our company, which is really good. We are one of the safest companies around. We did have one misstep that Tom will talk about, but overall our reliability numbers, which is what's on the chart shown, are phenomenal in terms of the industry. We are a member of the North American Transmission Forum, and even though they don't share publicly any of those numbers, I can just assure you we are in the top, not 10%, in the top 1% of the country in terms of reliability of the transmission system. And the two measures that we use, obviously, is when the transmission system has an outage which impacts customers, which is the SAIDI number, and the SFO is the forced outage rate that we had on the system where a transmission line went out and stayed out and had a problem. So just saying those, so in the year, I use the word unprecedented, although I know we've been similar to it at different times. We have a lot more transmission miles than we had back then. But we had one customer interrupted for an hour for the whole year. And that was a generator up in the Newport area. So that's pretty amazing. It is amazing. If you talk to other transmission utilities, they didn't even believe it. But that was it. That's why the number on the blue chart is so low. It's amazingly low, and we're very proud of that. So knock wood that we continue that effort. The other one has to do with forced outages. We had 9 last year, and which was a little bit higher, but 2 of them really weren't VELCOs. 2 of them were caused by customers, one at GMP and one at Global Foundries. So those 2 outages caused our lines to go out, but didn't affect customers. But we do. Our line did go out, and for the right reasons, but wasn't something that we had control over. So those numbers are still very, very, very good overall. So when you take out the customer ones, that line wouldn't be going up anymore. So, but we spent a lot of time on that.
Chris, when you say
Yes.
It went out for the right reason, do you mean that your transmission system responded when something went wrong at a customer premise?
Correct. Yes, our protection system worked correctly, and thank you for asking that. Yes. Yes, we had the outage. We should have had the outage. It was caused by something that was kind of out of control, but everything that we designed to protect the system worked correctly.
Sarah, if I could too, I mean, some of these things, these are things that we take equipment out of service in response to something happening. In some cases, it's automatic. I do recall, I think last year we had a situation with an inebriated landowner who was cutting down trees on his property. And the neighbors called us and said, this guy is doing something really dangerous. He was actually, I think, passed out in the right-of-way. He was cutting down enormous pine trees. In response to learning that information, we took those lines out of service so that to prevent a even worse situation.
Yeah, and we also got a call from snowmobilers in a right-of-way where not on a live conductor, but one of our supporting structure wires was loose and had fallen down into the snow, and so we took that line out immediately till we could figure out what was going on and fix it. So those are the types. A couple of those are like that. So overall reliability, very, very good. And we continue to work on improving this. We're in the process of every year, and last year we did replace about 200 of our 7,000 structures last year. So that's a big effort to improve reliability. Most of those structures, to be honest, were built in the late 1950s, early 1960s. They were end-of-life wood. And our high voltage 345 kV systems, those structures get replaced with steel. And this year, almost all of our wood structures at the 115 kV level will be replaced with steel that looks just like wood. It's really hard to tell the difference, but they are steel. We go back and forth on the lower voltages ones. Those poles tend to be shorter, smaller, and it's really in economics. We look at it every year. Sometimes wood is less expensive, sometimes steel is. We evaluate the long-term life cycle and make decisions almost on a year-by-year basis, but this year we're going to mostly do steel. So on the next thing, I want to make sure that you know the most up-to-date information concerning our duck curve in Vermont. I think all of you know what a duck curve is, which was made famous in California when they realized when you put a lot of photovoltaic onto your system, you depress your system peaks during the day when the sun is out. And we are no different. We are actually probably have the most, short of Hawaii in the U.S., probably one of the most pronounced duck curves in Vermont. So this is a year-by-year look at the duck curve in April. Why do we pick April? Because April is the lowest level of electric use during the year. So we picked the same, kind of the months around there. We do have one in June where it was very low. But that duck curve shows that a daily progression of what the load was doing. And you can see all the renewable generation in Vermont and what impact it has during the day when the sun is shining. I don't have on this chart what happens when it rains, but when it rains, it's very similar to the top line, to be honest, which is 2013. So a couple of points. We hit the low of 200 megawatts in the state. That is very low for 1,000 megawatt winter peak and summer peak. And you notice that it is significantly lower now. It's less than half of what it is in the middle of the night. So if you think about load being electric use in the middle of the night and think about in the middle of a sunny day, we're using less than half of that amount of power overall net in the state, but that's because of all of the distributed generation, which I have on my next slide. The only other point I would make is that we continue to be, our peaks in the summer and the winter are both after dark. Every single day. Our highest amount of use of electricity is after dark all year round. Typically the winter peak always was obviously after dark at dinner time, but now it's in the summertime, it's between 8, 9, a little after 9 p.m. in the summertime. So that is our peak time where we really want to do demand management issues. So one of the drivers on that one is, but the point is, when do you want to charge your vehicles? You're going to want to charge your vehicles in the middle of the day on a sunny day. So just a thought. So the next one is I wanted to show you the chart, and you may probably know this full well because the commission does approve all these, but we're up to about 390 megawatts worth of renewable photovoltaics on the system right now. Remember, our total peak is 1,000 megawatts. We're almost at 40% of that peak. That is one of the highest in the country, short of Hawaii. So that's an amazing number. A lot of people don't realize Vermont has such a high percentage, and you add 18% on top of that for wind capability. Not that the wind and the solar happen at the same time, but if you would add that up, we're over 50%. And so pushing 60%. So that is a number that's foremost in the country when it comes to renewable energy inside the state. The issue obviously is it doesn't occur all the time. The load factors are low. So I just wanted to show you that where we're at, and open it up if you have any questions concerning the performance of the system.
I had one question. What's that second line that shows up on the far right side of the chart that shows the solar PV growth? There's a little shorter line sliding slightly downward starting around 2015.
All that is it's kind of an arrow showing that peak, where that peak is, where the other line is, that box goes with that. It's kind of like an arrow to the 390 megawatt. That's all that is.
All right.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
So, Chris, thank you for that. And there's not a slide on this next point that I wanted to address. And before I hand it over to Michelle, the VELCO, we're proud of our safety, our reliability, and you'll hear from Michelle. I think the financial performance is very strong, but we are by no means perfect. And earlier in 2020, in June of 2020, we had an event on our system where a tree contacted a 345 kV line outside the old Vermont Yankee power plant. It tripped the line off, and for us, we have spent a lot of effort on our vegetation management program. I think it's one of the best. One of the reasons we have such good reliability is how well we do with our trees. So to have a tree contact a 345 line was humbling, disappointing, and of course, it is something that NERC pays a lot of attention to. Of course, it was a tree was the initiating event during the blackout in 03, 04. So this gets a lot of attention and has gotten a lot of attention. The way we've approached this event in terms of reporting it, we brought it to the NPCC and subsequently NERC. And it looks like we are going to get a $100,000 fine as a consequence of this event. As I said, humbling and disappointing. But our approach in response to this event is to, we very much support a learning environment and looking at what were the gaps in our processes and systems that allowed this event to take place. And in this one, and we shared all of that information with the NPCC and others. And so we took an approach with NPCC to be completely transparent and try to engage with them on what happened, exactly what happened, what steps we're going to take to mitigate the risk of this reoccurring, and I think that approach is one that I think is the best one in terms of positioning us so that we don't have a recurrence of this one. Quite frankly, this was an asset, a very short line segment that wasn't on our radar, and it should have been. So, like I said, a humbling experience and one that we're going to do everything we can to make sure we don't see a recurrence. But in the transmission world, this focus on making sure you don't have these kinds of events is very high, and it's inappropriate. So I'll just stop there and see if there's any questions or comments.
I had one. Is VELCO doing anything special in light of the MO ash borer issue, namely that we're going to lose all our ash trees over time?
Yes, and we have a special program to proactively remove as many of the ash trees along in the edges of our corridor before they become infected, because of course the emerald ash borer creates a very dangerous situation when you have infected trees, because the ash trees tend to fail unexpectedly and present a real danger. And the other thing, through Chris's leadership at our operating committee, is that we are coordinating with the other distribution companies on programs to address this. But it's for us, of course, it's going to be thousands of trees that we're going to be dealing with, and I think this year was the first year where we started removing those trees, and it's going to be a multi-year effort.
And are you doing something with the trees to get them into the energy production side of things, or what are you doing? That's a lot of wood.
Yes. Well, in most cases, we have an easement, and we don't own the land, and hence we don't own the trees. I know that our teams work with landowners to coordinate our activities out there, and in anticipation, in situations where we're going to be removing trees, working with the landowner, make it available to them if they wish to take it off, take the wood away, or to use the wood. Like I said, we don't have the ability to take the wood ourselves.
And Tom, can I just add, we have taken down a couple thousand trees already, and we're working with the state to coordinate it. But one of the issues is transporting ash trees is a really bad thing. So as soon as you were to take those trees, those ash trees, cut them up or put them on a truck to bring them up to be used as biomass, you've now transferred the emerald ash borer to a new area. And that's how a lot of those ash trees, and this has moved from Michigan all the way now to Vermont and Maine, New Hampshire, is that a lot of it came from trucking those ash trees around. So that you really don't want to put them on a truck. Typically, the ash borer only flies about a mile and a half a year. So it doesn't go far. But if you put it on a truck and move it to Burlington, guess what? You just, you moved it 50 miles. So that's really the issue about really trying not to move the ash trees around as much as possible.
Okay, Michelle, if you would, please.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Dan, do you want to go to the next slide? So we thought that it would be nice to just update you or give you a status on, our financial position at Vermont Transco. And one of the things that, we really have strived to deliver value to Vermont, particularly is in our operating costs and a controllable cost. And we've had a flat nominal operating expense budget since 2014. I say nominal because we do increase it slightly for consumer price index. So it's like this past year, I want to say it was less than 1% increase from year to year. And we not only have met the operating expense budget every year, but we have continued to perform and under budget. And so, one of our key performance indicators is looking at our operating expense and whether we can manage it. And our target is to be on budget. But the good news is in the last 6 or 10 years, we've been under budget. So great performance from the company in terms of operating expense, particularly in 2020 when we had to shut down capital projects for, I think it was at least 2 weeks, wasn't it, Chris and Tom? And those individuals were working on expense projects. So, those dollars flow back to our expense budget, but we still were able to not only meet our 2020 budget, but deliver results that were under budget. In terms of our treasury, we have both long-term debt and short-term debt. We just issued, and actually you approved in 2019, and we issued the debt in early $50 million. We have a credit rating of an A high stable from DBRS, and the NAIC, which is the association that looks for, it's really insurance companies, we're rated 1, which is the best rating you could have. But the good news is when we originally asked for approval on this $50 million long-term debt, we were looking at the market at the time, and private placements were in the range from like 3.5 to 4%. When we went to the market early last year, we had we set a coupon rate at 2.93%. This was 90 basis points over a credit spread of 90 basis points. But really, this was just excellent for us in terms of private placements are usually at least 25 basis points higher than public utilities, and we actually came in 2 to 6 basis points tighter than publics. So a lot of this has to do with our credit rating, how we perform, the tariffs and what back the tariffs, and just our, our company and how we are, how the money is generated and the tariffs that back that up. So great performance in long-term debt. In terms of our short-term debt, we did a request for proposal a couple years ago. TD Bank in Vermont had the best pricing, and we have now a $140 million line of credit with them. And they actually, when we increased our line of credit, they lowered the spread to 60 basis points over LIBOR rate from 65 basis points. Again, delivering value to Vermont because those are costs that are savings in Vermont. By the way, on the long-term debt, when we were forecasting 4%, and then having a coupon at 2.93%, that was savings for Vermonters of over $500,000 a year. The short-term debt obviously is a lot smaller, but still a savings overall for Vermonters under the 1991 Vermont transmission tariff. Any questions on this slide before we move to the next slide? Okay, thanks, Dan. One of the things that in April, around the April timeframe when COVID was really hitting us hard, the CARES Act came out. We reviewed that CARES Act. We made sense to take advantage of something that was in the CARES Act, which was this net operating loss provision, where we made a $9 million contribution to our pension plan, creating a net operating loss for 2019 that we could carry back to 2014 at a tax rate of 21% versus we paid 34% for those years from 2014 to 17 before the Tax Reform Act. And so this had bottom line savings for Vermonters in 2020 of $1 million. So that's some more good news. You know, we're always looking for how can we deliver the most value to Vermont? What are the ways that what can we take advantage of? You know, does it make sense to take advantage of? And this was just one area that we did. We did apply for the PPM as well, but pulled back on that. And I think you probably know some of the background on that related to that. Property taxes is an area, though, that we have had some not such good news, but where we have one particular person, he's an appraiser from New Hampshire, that has been now not only in the town of Vernon, but now West Rutland, Coventry, and Proctor. And we're litigating in all of those 4 towns that are grieving. There's a difference between what the appraiser thinks the value of our property is and what we, based on the method that we're using, which is this Handy Whitman Iowa curve method for transmission, which most of the towns in Vermont accept. These towns we are in litigation with them. You know, just this year, we just to let you know, property taxes, we actually have to pay the bill, even though we're in litigation. And then if we win, the town pays us back. So in terms of property taxes, we are over budget in 2020 due to these 4 towns. And the timing on the actual decision is probably going to be sometime later this year, maybe even early 2022, since at this point the party experts reside outside of the state and we have to do site visits, and just logistically it's difficult to get this resolved sooner than later. And then lastly, on this slide, FERC, the good news is right around Christmas, I want to say, FERC approved the settlement resolving all the issues, and this was a case, this is a formula rate complaint that was, we have been, and I say we, meaning the New England transmission owners, not just VELCO, have been working on since the end of 2015. This is the template, so to speak, in the calculation under the ISO Open Access Transmission Tariff, in which Vermont Transco receives over 80% of its revenues through this tariff. So it's important to us to get this right, and we have been waiting for this to be settled for years. Like I said, finally FERC approved it. Unfortunately, the New England transmission owners, when we filed this in August, we asked FERC to approve it by November 1st so we could implement the new calculation or template January 1 of 21. Because FERC did not issue their approval, but at that time frame, it didn't happen until after Christmas. The new template isn't going into place until 1/1/22. So and just the biggest component of this formula rate and the resolution around it is it's going to have less volatility for Vermont. Right now, the rate is set every year, and Vermont Transco receives revenue, but it's based on weather, the economy, I would say, mostly weather, distributed generation and how that's performing, because the distribution utilities who pay this rate to ISO New England pay it based on the coincident peak, and the rate is set based on the previous year's coincident peak. So if the next year the coincident peaks are lower, then the New England transmission owners don't collect the revenue that they thought they were should be collecting. So what ends up happening in Vermont under our formula, under the 91 VTA, is the local customer, the Vermont customers, end up paying that difference. And in the future, the new formula rate is going to resolve that issue in the terms of we are allowed to true up our revenues. So if we don't receive the full revenue requirement that it was requested from Vermont Transco, let's just say it was 170 million in 1 year, then in the next year and we only get 165 million because the billing is still going to be on coincident peak. We are allowed to collect the 5 million in the next year. So we will be booking the 91 VTA on an accrual basis going forward. So the good news is this is going to be less volatility under the 91 VTA. Great news. I've shared this with all of the utilities. By the way, we have something called the CFO Forum, and we meet on a monthly basis, and it's all the CFOs of the distribution utilities are invited. And we have a set agenda. We go over a lot of information, financial information, things like I'm discussing today and how this impacts Vermont. So, any questions on this slide? Okay, lastly, I just thought it was important to show about the ISO-O and regional network service. The rates are continuing to increase. This is for the regional network service. Transmission rate is paid for by all the Vermont utilities. I'm sure you see this in their rate cases, but the rate that you can see, and it's underlined 4. This is the rate forecast. It's 138 million. Right today, it's 122 million. 2021, we're forecasting, New England is forecasting that rate is going to increase to 138 and so on, 147 through. So they're still building in New England. This is pooled transmission facilities. Most of it is reliability, if not all of it is based on reliability. But this is just more information for you.
I have one question, and I don't know whether you're the right one to answer this. Do you have any particular plans on the technological fixes, if any, that VELCO is thinking about to deal with the SHI constraint issues?
Chris, or Tom, do you want to answer that?
Mr. Chairman, I think the challenge up at SHIA is that it is not a reliability problem, which has been the construct that we have done much of our work in the past, and that what's not been resolved is we certainly know how to address this to create more capacity by expanding the transmission system. But the conversation I think that needs to be happening here in Vermont is how much capacity do we want, because we're going to have to pay for that transmission capacity. I do believe that the upgrades, and Chris can speak to these, that the upgrades that have been made or are being made in terms of some of the existing system up there will have addressed most, if not all, of the constraints that the area has been seeing. But in terms of creating new headroom, that's not something that we are planning to do right now. We are looking at, are there ways that we can be helpful to maximize the use of the existing assets, including, our communication network to make this, again, extract that available capacity. But, the upgrades to create more capacity up there on a significant basis are pretty substantial on our system. Chris, I don't know if you'd want to expand or address other issues on that question.
Yeah, I would just say, Tom, following up what Tom's saying, is that we have done a number of, I would say, relatively small projects with the DUs and some things that were funded by the wind farms to increase or to mitigate, and we pretty much have the strategy was to mitigate the disruptions and the curtailment of the wind farms up north, and but not to substantially increase beyond that the headroom for additional renewables. Part of that is really a funding. Who pays for it is going to be the issue. And we, as Tom said, we certainly know how to be able to do that. We know where the bottlenecks are. but the issue is, how's that funding going to take place? Who will pay for that is really the issue. And it wouldn't be regionally. The region will not do it because it's not a reliability-based system. From their definition of reliability, right? Their attitude would be, well, we just turn it off. We just curtail it. So if you wanted to not curtail it, then the transmission system needs to be reinforced to allow renewables to operate more during the year.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we could certainly spend a lot of time on there are real alternatives. Is there a way to essentially create more demand in places where these resources are being located? But I'm reluctant to jump into that area just because I'm recognizing the time constraints. I think next up is Carrick, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dan. Let me tie together a few things here. Tom said at the outset, pointing to, and as Michelle talked about, our mission and vision. Our role is to serve as when you're owned by 17 distribution utilities and a public benefits corporation, you better know a little bit of something about collaboration. So part of our role is how can we help serve as a trusted partner in creating a sustainable Vermont. Now that can sound cliche or trite. Well, it isn't here. I think you know the people on this team, and it's real. So how can we help to do our part to deliver value such that we can create that sustainable Vermont? Michelle mentioned about one of our strategic key performance indicators, KPIs, and the three are there. Basically, can we increase revenues, find ways to lower our impact on Vermonters, as well as decrease our budget? One of the things this team is very aware of is one of the best things we can do, keep the lights on, but also don't cost too much. How can we keep costs down? But if you're looking to generate additional value, what do we have? As Tom likes to say, we don't have any money of our own. Every single dollar we have comes from a customer, from a ratepayer. And it moves through us. So what we have is our people. We have the relationships we've built up over time, the assets we've mentioned a few that we have in place, and the operating model. How, VELCO is a unique construct in the nation. How we can use that to deliver more value. Like what's next? What else can we do? What we have found has been what's going on, and Commissioner Hoffman, you had mentioned this about FERC Order 2222. There are other challenges that we know now that are going on. For instance, in the course of exploring what do we need to do to continue to stay reliable, we have found that we're going to have to increase our fiber network. You may recall it was about 10, 11 years ago when we substantially expanded that. Well, the time has come, and we don't do these projects often. But the drivers are such, and these drivers are accelerating. Way before FERC Order 2222, there was a need, the explosion and the ongoing incremental growth in distributed renewable generation is having a greater impact on grid operation. Well, then, not surprisingly, NERC has taken notice and said, okay, transmission companies, you need to do a better job and understand what is connected to the distribution utilities on your system. If it's 400 megawatt on a roughly at peak 1,000 megawatt system, what do we do if there's a substantial, for whatever reason, outage? How do we do contingency planning, real-time operations, as well as for planning? That boils down to data. How do we get as I had said before, how do we get the information that we need to be able to do this? Well, among the things we're pursuing, we know what has worked in the past and what we see coming now. For our role, what we have sought to do is to align our people as best as possible around a certain initiative and then move forward. So where have we done that? Well, I think the Statewide Smart Grid project was one where we did that. All utilities, the congressional delegations, successive governors, the state legislature, all supported an initiative that resulted in a $138 million grant that enabled us to get we're right about now 92 to 94% deployment of smart meters statewide. Concurrently, we built this about 1,500 mile statewide fiber optic system, Dan will talk about. And effectively, that created this innovation platform, which we've used. I think this commission is aware. VELCO and IBM and Boston Consulting Group created a startup called Utopus Insights, which was subsequently purchased by Vestas, the world's largest wind turbine manufacturer in the nation that they operate. Well, what's next? I mean, that's what we're working on now. We have several initiatives, some of which we can get into. But really, Dan, if you go to the next slide, please. There are a number of things that we have in play. I don't know that any are particularly right for you now, but there's exciting work we're doing on storage. There's some interesting partnerships we have with Esri, and which is the GIS, all the mapping, the fundamental mapping tools that you use. We have an exciting partnership with EPRI, Pacific Northwest National Lab, all leveraging the unique construct, that Team Vermont approach that we have, where you have distribution utilities, a transmission utility, closely connected with an ability to use the laboratory that we've built. Dan and I just wanted to put this slide up here because really what we also have, and this is where things are emerging on, data is destiny. If you have, like, who controls the information, who is getting the information, what format, how do we broker this information honestly and collaboratively in a way that helps Vermont chart its future? That's something I think we have learned. If Vermont doesn't take control over this strategic resource, there will be others who will dictate to us how things should go. So in addition to making sure we manage electrons, it's how we manage data to be able to continue to generate value, find ways to do that, always tied to system reliability in a way that lowers costs or adds, in some modest way, adds value. Just one example occurs to me right now. Chris's team did an excellent job in creating a new MAT tracking app. The mats we use to lay down the ground so you don't harm wetland, threatened, endangered species. No one had developed a MAT tracking app. Well, we have, and that has produced great savings. Other people are interested in it. It's allowed us to better manage our mats such that we can rent or lease those mats out to others, just as one example. There's other examples what that happens. There'll be more to come, but I think it's fair to say we now have a full, what we call like a development pipeline with about 8 things in play, but mindful that we don't want to prejudice your thoughts. Some of it might come before you, some of it might not. We just wanted to let you know that currently there are roughly seven issues that we're working on in particular that Dan will speak to, including a company I believe you're familiar with, Dynamic Organics. They work with Green Mountain Power on their flexible load pilot program, and we are engaging with them to help us again on this data challenge that we have. Other than that, we continue to look for options regionally as well as nationally, and I think there is a lot of opportunity to come. And with that, Dan, why don't I kick, unless there's any questions, I'd love to kick it to you, Dan.
Okay, thank you. So Carrick spoke of the fiber infrastructure that we have in place today. Today we have 1,500 miles of fiber. This map shows those routes that are in service. It connects to over 300 substations in the state, and that's the baseline, that first phase of construction that we've gone through for our data collection and control of the power grid. It's important just to note here that, you know, across this infrastructure that we have is, we're all familiar with SCADA, the control, but we have video, remote monitoring, door access controllers, our voice systems, and importantly, our high-speed clearing schemes. Latency is a big deal on systems like this. And when I speak of that, we're talking about microsecond latency between nodes, which is very important. While we look at this as well, and thinking of advancing states' broadband initiatives, we've also met. I just want to make a point that we've met with many of the carriers within the state, the CUDs particularly, in how can we take what's already there and leverage that to move some of the state initiatives forward. How can we help solve some of these problems that exist around?
excuse me, can you expand a little
Go
bit
ahead.
on, can you expand just a little bit on that last point? What are you actually doing and what are you seeing as the prospects that this network, which obviously doesn't get you to someone in their home being able to have high-speed internet, but is part of the infrastructure, what's actually happening and how do you see it moving the broadband expansion forward?
Great question. Thank you. So when you look at this map, it's a middle mile network, and there are several middle mile networks in the state. We don't go downtown in the communities. We generally are on the outskirts. And so getting to the home is the biggest challenge we have here, solving the problem. We've assessed, we've participated and assessed what are the biggest challenges, and it's that last mile of getting into the home. We've worked with, I'll use one example, we worked in the Northeast Kingdom in helping a wireless internet service provider gain access to, number one, CARES Act money, some grant money so that they can deploy their infrastructure. We've made available some of our wireless infrastructure and our fiber so that they can get connectivity. And they're looking to pick up about 500 families in that region. We have done fiber exchanges with carriers to connect between regions in the state infrastructure that they might have in different regions. We've met with the CUDs to help explain what our network is and how we can help and what it is not. So it's not the last mile solution either. And through all of that, we've made it available to the extent that we can to help advance broadband initiatives as we talked about.
The only thing, Dan, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, go on, Kerry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to add, I want to make it clear, for like at least March, April, May, June, Dan and I think we were doing, Dan, roughly at least a third of our time was on broadband. And what's emerged, I would say, Mr. Chairman, is that locally, it is such a Star Wars bar set of characters in this space where the local internet service providers don't always talk to. The people weren't talking together. Half the work we did was to connect various people. Did you know this need here? You could help with this. And Dan was able to leverage some of his relationships and ideas, for instance, with the Vermont State Colleges. How about if we you can utilize our substation, we'll bounce a signal to you so people can use the State College parking lots, for instance. And some of them are using that. We had to have some needless hurdles there, but so the idea was, as local as possible, how can we leverage our ideas, again, our assets to deliver service? Dan had the idea and helped with the people so these 300, 400 families will get service in the kingdom. Statewide, we've been working the distribution utilities, and I think, Mr. Chairman, you and the Commission probably have already seen or might very well see paperwork on this. What's emerged is the whole area of, in addition to system reliability, which is foundational, is energy equity. And the fact that, is it right for the same people who already have assets, is the same like Chittenden County or places that already have that population density or a market such that they continue to have services. Well, now with the convergence of communications and its criticality to grid innovation, the people who don't have that market density, don't have the existing telecommunication providers, are suffering on the energy side. So how, in the name of service of energy equity to create a sustainable Vermont, how can VELCO help our distribution utilities better deliver broadband? That has been a focus of this team for some time. And I think pointing back to the emerging fiber reliability project, we've sought to do that in tandem and cooperation with the CUDs. We wanted them to form a statewide association. We're grateful that they did. We've been in close contact with them. We sought to take advantage of a federal auction opportunity that was recently launched and underway, which I can't talk about, but it was there. There's some other opportunities that we're availing ourselves of, but I think that is an area for rich collaboration and I think will be actively discussed at the State House this session. So I think that's one of those, Dan, I think it's fair to say more to come.
What I was going to ask is, am I correct, do I understand correctly that if VELCO is to get the advantages of robust aggregation as a way of getting distributed energy resources into grid control, that last mile has to be bridged? You have to be able to get to that individual's solar or battery, electric vehicle, whatever you're using to aggregate and then put those resources into the system. Is it essential that that last mile problem gets solved in order for that to fully work?
Dan, I have my response. Dan.
Okay, well, I would say, yes, the deeper we go and the more information we have, the better we are at solving those problems, and the more opportunity we have to solve those problems.
And what I would say, I think Dan is right. I would say, yes, it is. That's what we're trying to do. And that's among the values we're seeking to solve for by understanding how deep into the system we have to go. And that is precisely the conversation and the analysis and the planning that's underway now, exactly how deep and where do we have to have the connections get into to enable or to shorten that, to make that last mile, that last 100 yards. Because VELCO there'll be a line of jurisdiction we can go, but the greater collaboration with the distribution utility, given the emerging NERC standards and the like, is driving us to go deeper into communities than we previously have had to go. That enables distribution utilities to drive down their costs to help with that last mile. Or among the values to be secured is the one you identified, in addition to system reliability. If that's responsive.
Good.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Fiber, and I'll come back to talk a little more about the fiber and the overall infrastructure. But in addition to the fiber, we've also built a statewide radio system, and this map shows 56 sites that we have predominantly within the state. There are a couple that are outside so that we can cover the low-lying regions of the Connecticut River Valley area. But we built this trunked radio system, which is available to all the Vermont distribution utilities, and it also integrates the DUs as well as VELCO's operation. This network covers this. Now, this overlay here, you can still see where the radio towers are, but what this illustrates is the coverage, the penetration that system provides. So you see in Rochester, there's some areas up in the Northeast Kingdom.
Dan, just a quick question.
Was there a question?
Yes, just a quick question. What does trunked mean? I don't know what that means, trunked radio. It's on your previous slide.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so a trunked radio system is one that shares channels. So across the state, we have 50 channels, and it allows you to dynamically allocate those channels or trunks between use groups. So Green Mountain Power might be transmitting in Rutland and in Colchester simultaneously. That may not be the same frequency used, but it's a channel that is trunked through so that to the user, it appears as one system. The cell phone, the older cell phone architecture was a more modern trunked system. Lots of frequencies, but the user experienced a single channel. Does that help explain
Yes,
that?
thank
Okay, I'm sorry I didn't think to explain that earlier, and it's an important piece to that. So the previous networks that were in the state were single channel radio systems that were operated by each of the distribution utilities. So if you could imagine the state covered with numerous networks which overlapped in many areas but did not cover the entire state. It was quite challenging. And so VELCO's role here was to integrate all of that, create a system that optimized the radio spectrum, which is very difficult to come by, and also optimized our assets, our fiber network, our operating model, and provided a valued service to our owners. And here I wanted to point out that there are about 1,000 subscribed radios on this network. It is built specifically for the first responders in the utility sector. This system is critical in putting the power system back together during storms. So when those storms hit, our focus is on making sure these radio towers are up, operational and performing as necessary so that the first responders can get out there and get the wires back up safely, and they have the infrastructure to do that. Any questions on this before I? Okay. So, this map is the same one here, but putting it all together, we have a comprehensive network that's built for grid reliability, and it requires real-time data flow. It's the underpinnings for not only public safety and also for our utility personnel. We need all of this infrastructure to operate the grid reliably and to operate it safely. The part about having a private infrastructure gives us a higher degree of reliability. We couldn't get this any other way. It is far more secure and it's more cost effective. We're able to operate this far more cost effectively than we would if we were trying to pay this out to the common carriers. Given the emerging standards and regulations that are coming our way that Carrick talked about when FERC Order 2222, we're looking to what's next. And what is next is having communications deeper into the infrastructure so we have more flow, more data information, deeper from solar panels, storage, and as far down as we can reach. That is critical for grid reliability and providing our operations center the information they need. Now, this next phase, we're in the scoping phases right now, we're looking at connecting an additional 68 substations in the state back into the backbone. That also includes adding another about 400 solar and storage locations in the state. So these large 150 kW and larger solar panels, the commercial size units that we see everywhere now, we need that data as well. And it equates to about, currently we're looking at about 500 miles of additional fiber that would be deployed in the state. Now, with all of this flow of data, we're receiving currently somewhere in the order of 70 to 80,000 data points every 2 seconds. And we have a data archiver that stores all this information. And with that, we're able to store all data points within the state. It's called a community agreement, and this is something that we have worked hard and Carrick set up, where any energy information, we can centralize that. We can put it into this archiver and then pull reports out and basically visualize what's happening on the system in a real-time fashion as a tool for our operators, but also to the DUs so they can see what's happening around them. This next slide I just wanted to talk a little bit about security, and given the time, I'll move along here. But I think everybody's heard about the Solarwinds breach, and I think it's appropriate to just talk about this for a moment here. VELCO does use the Solarwinds product. We are not operating on the version that was breached. So just to make that clear that we're safe in that regard, we're secure. But if we were, I also wanted to point out that we go through great pains to make sure that our architecture yields a secure solution for these types of events. And so our architecture does not allow products like this to communicate outward. The failure in this situation with the Solarwinds product boils down to simply it was a password security breach. The perpetrator had access for a long time, and it was discovered when the perpetrator
losing your audio.
Dan.
Can't hear you.
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
yeah.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, where did I leave? Where did my audio drop out?
Hard to pick up on your stream.
Okay. What I'll say is the punchline here is so the Solarwinds Breach didn't impact VELCO for two reasons. One, we're not operating on that version, and two, our architecture in the way we deploy our technologies would prevent that breach from having any impact on VELCO. That's the punchline. I'm sorry my audio dropped out. I wish I had better internet. But there are a few data points here I just want to throw out that I think are interesting. And at VELCO, we have, in 1 year, we experience over 1.1 million events. There are 10,000 of these are deemed medium criticality, and 1,000 of those are deemed critical. Now, let me explain what that means. Is we have an internet presence, and we try and limit that presence as much as possible so that our exposure is very little. And what we're exposed to is robots, which are essentially are scanning our front door. They're looking to exploit systems that are unpatched, open ports. Most of this is not targeted. Most of it is just essentially robots that are looking. Some of it may be. More than 50% of that is organized crime. They're looking for a return on their time spent. Given the state of things recently, we expect to see an increase for perhaps what might be more targeted and nation state. But regardless, we're protecting ourselves in a layered approach. Clearly, there are more attempts to enter our system than humanly possible. And so what we have is we have a sophisticated tool set, multiple layers, which detect and protect us against these types of events, anybody who's trying to come in. It is a dynamic system. So if there are parts of our internet presence which we have to have for our day-to-day business, if we see a system or an IP address who's scanning our system, we take note of that, and in that database, if that same address tries to legitimately connect to one of our systems, we block them. Because just moments ago or weeks ago, we knew they were scanning us, so they have no business contacting our business systems. So it's a dynamic system. It requires continuous tuning, but that's just one example of how that takes place. We just had an audit. We went through an audit just in the last quarter, and one of the comments that they left us with was that our technology choices and our integrations are well above average for the industry, which is good. You can never stay too far ahead. The threats that we face in the past were signature-based, and you would look for files and a signature within the file, and no longer is that really appropriate. These days, we're looking for behaviors, and it's a dynamic behavior where it's two machines that shouldn't be talking to each other for some reason begin to or attempt to, and other volumes, ports that should not be open, things like that. So it's more of a dynamic nature, but we've really took a lot of effort to find the right tool sets that allow our resources to do the best they can, experts. This slide is just a little bit about the foundation of our cybersecurity program, and it starts from the outside looking in. This is a defense in-depth approach, which is widely recognized throughout the industry. But you start with policies and procedures and making sure you have proper governance in your plan. And then the next ring in is you go to physical defense where we're keeping our equipment locked, essentially. It's pretty straightforward. But we get then into network defense where, we need to monitor, as I described, active monitoring, managing, and securing our network transport systems, extensive real-time monitoring. We encrypt between station locations, between our substations back to our primary, and anything that leaves our network is always encrypted. We have access control, so if any computer is trying to run an application that we haven't already given authorization to run, it is shut down. And that it takes a certain amount of work and tuning, but it also really locks things down for us in a way that we can assure the computer networks are secure. The next ring in is configuration, and of course ensuring that our servers and workstations are configured properly, that we've turned off all unnecessary services. You know, when you get a Windows machine, it turns everything on. Well, we turn everything off, and we build that up, the most secure approach. Training and education. Our users, people sitting at the keyboards, are probably one of our biggest risks, so we provide extensive training and reminders for our staff and the staff in large at VELCO, and particularly we put a lot of investment in our subject matter experts in the security team to make sure that they're ahead of the curve in regards to cybersecurity. The active defense and monitoring I talked about, we're looking for anomalies on the network. The old method, as I said, was signature files, and currently we're looking for anything that is not normal. So you baseline your systems, and you make sure that you don't allow computers that don't need to talk to each other, and monitor network traffic volumes, any channel or port usage. This all boils down to ensuring grid reliability. Our data and the control of the grid is critical, of course. And so, having a really good or excellent data transport system, management of that, and security of that data is really fundamental to what we do here, and it's the expectation for our operational excellence. But what's next? And so the next part is taking that data and making it into something useful, and being able to run analytics against that information and predict what's going to happen next. And the more information we get deeper in the infrastructure, we can begin to predict better what's happening on the grid real time and what's about to happen, so that we can take steps to mitigate that and control things. We've hired Morgan Casella, I think the Dynamic Organics, I'm sorry, and he's helping us work through some of the tools we have, making sure that we have access to the right data, and developing a common information management platform so that we can communicate with our distribution utilities transparently, as well as our own internal and the region. So that this information platform would allow us to gather the information, centralize it, run queries, and present the what's happening on the grid real time. With that, are there any questions with what I've covered so far?
Very thorough presentation.
I have a question. We talked earlier about using the expanded fiber network to assist in responding to the shortfall in broadband around the state. Is there any technical security risk associated with making cable network available to non-utility purposes, to everybody else? Does the broadband reduce your cybersecurity? Does the broadband expansion effort reduce your cybersecurity?
Right. Okay. So, if not architected properly, that could be a concern. There are two ways we approach that. Is one, it's generally in the interest of a carrier to have dark fiber access, and so by being able to make available a pair or two of fibers, we don't have an excess, a tremendous amount of excess fiber, but if we had a few pairs of fiber and we could make that available to a carrier to connect to a region that doesn't have coverage. That is physical separation where there's no touching of that information. They don't intermingle. When we transport, we're very careful to make sure that we're not integrating any of a third party's traffic in with our control traffic. So we're very strict about keeping traffic separated on any of our platforms.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yes.
So I'm looking at the time. If there aren't any other questions, I'd like to turn it over to Carrick and Shana.
Okay, very quickly, I want to make sure we have at least some time for questions. Thank you, Tom. I would say this. Dan did a great job. We've talked about innovation and data, but fundamentally what we've learned is if you want to make progress in Vermont or perhaps anywhere, it does boil down to relationships and building trust. One thing we wanted to make sure we did was, one, to say thank you, because the thank you to the commission, the radio network that Dan displayed hugely utilized the 248A process. So to the degree, thank you for, thank you for those getting those out, because that has enabled us. It's a big deal keeping grid reliable. Secondly, thank you, Commissioner Hoffman, for serving as a guest speaker to all VELCO employees. That was a hugely successful conversation. Our employees loved it. Part of the pandemic, what we've done is have twice-a-week calls, and every Friday we have a guest speaker. We have about 152 employees. We get about 98% participation, so it's a big deal. And if we can get by Kyle, I'm going to be reaching out to some other commissioners. I'd love to be able to have you. So thank you for that. As I mentioned previously, the VELCO ownership and its board is a very, like Vermont's kitchen table, energy kitchen table. Well, the Vermont System Planning Committee is very similar. And again, mindful of the time, Shana is the coordinator, facilitator for this, who runs the show, and she does a great job. And I think everyone on this call, you all understand the genesis and why it's there. Shana and I wanted to bring this to your attention because it is like one of the few forums in the state where you have all the stakeholders as are identified on that slide. And I think Tom Nauer utilized that, was invited and spoke to a report that the commission issued with regards to electric vehicles. We're still pondering what might be additional value and use, and would be very grateful for any feedback we can get from the PUC on how might this forum be better utilized to advance the goals, advance development of transparent accountability, timeliness in terms of rules, regulations, requirements, especially in this time of transformation. This works. The VSPC works. I think, Shane, I think it's fair to say, if you could, like 30 seconds or less, Shana, can you give a quick, since there's been a consistent theme on data, I'm looking at point 3, anything you want to say about Morgan Casella and our work with the department?
Sure, and I think, Carrick, you really got to the main point with the VSPC. So, as grid operations are becoming more complex, the VSPC is continuing to play an important role in providing a forum for a diverse stakeholder group to enable foundational learning about these really complex initiatives that we're currently dealing with and what we see in the future. It's enabling dialogue among those stakeholders, and most importantly, the coordination and collaboration that might not happen if we're not meeting as regularly as we are to talk about these this transformation that's happening. And then just to Carrick's point about this third item around shared distributed energy resources, as it aligns with that question around, FERC Order 2222, the VSPC is on our radar in terms of how does this have an impact to Vermont? What does this look like? How do we prepare for this into the future? And so at our upcoming January quarterly meeting, which is taking place on January 27th, we've invited Dynamic Organics to come in and talk about those specific questions through that lens of data specifically. And we'll also have a ISO New England representative to kind of give an overarching presentation about for quarter 22-22. And then I'll just put in a pitch for, this is a big VSBC meeting because it will also be the meeting where we unveil the results of the analysis that our planning team has been doing over the past several months for the 2021 long-range transmission plan. So I'll leave it there and just see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Shana. I just want to, I'm carrying some water. We've been working very closely with the Department of Public Service. We run what's called the Regional Utility Issues Group for the department that seek to discuss and align issues for advocacy at the regional level at ISO New England. That's in addition to the Vermont System Planning Committee. But this conversation is taking place as referenced in item 3. There's a role for the PUC where we're trying to figure out, and the department is trying to figure out, and you may get a knock on your door. How do we ensure that the equipment is in place from distributed energy providers such that we're getting the data that we need? Is that 5.500? Is that the rule? Is that something that needs to be done? I think there could be something that's coming there. Unless there's any questions, Tom, I want to kick it back to you.
I'm not saying any.
I have one question that relates to your point number 5. As you probably know, the commission periodically meets with 2 members of the ISO board who've been assigned to Vermont, and the opportunity for us to discuss with them concerns, things that we want to know about that ISO is doing and so forth. Are there any things that you think would be useful for us to raise with our ISO board representatives that impact any of the things that VELCO is doing in its interrelationship with ISO?
Maybe I'll start. One thing, Mr. Chairman, that is on our radar is the activity at the regional level as it relates to offshore wind, and the discussion about how are those resources going to be integrated into the transmission network in New England. Certainly, right now it's not clear what level of participation Vermont utilities will have as purchasers of that wind. The concern that I have, and I think we've talked about this within here in Vermont, is the cost of this interconnection. These interconnections could be substantial, and I know that in southern New England, they are likely to get a significant part of their renewable energy portfolio from these resources in the years to come. And I think it will be important for Team Vermont to be engaged in how these resources are going to be integrated, but perhaps more importantly, how they're going to be paid for. And this is not reliability work. This is obviously work to integrate clean resources into the grid. And as I said, this could be substantial. So I would encourage the commission in discussions with ISO to that the cost allocation issue is on your radar.
If I may, Tom, thank you for asking the question, Mr. Chairman. I would also say I'm sort of self-selecting issues because, we meet periodically with Gordon and his leadership team, and it's pretty hard for us to affect change. But so I would say, in terms of issues to raise, I think, Tom, it's fair to say, issue of storage. Do we think, fundamentally, it's how can we move a bit faster to get the grid that we think that we all the New England states want to get to? I would say storage. I still think there's other RTOs that are a bit more hospitable in their financial treatment and the like in terms of storage opportunities and market there is one. Secondly, I think the aforementioned COO of ISO New England asked to meet with us, in particular Dan and team, to understand what we've built here, the platform we've built. I say that because I don't think we want to pay for ISO New England to gather all the data unto itself and decide kind of what happens and which way we're going to move in certain things, especially in this period of rapid change. So I guess you could say the concern is ensuring there's some jurisdictional control over over data that would be good for us to maintain. And lastly, I kind of put it to you, Mr. Chairman, that Governor Scott Vermont signed up on a letter citing some very specific pointed concerns with ISO New England, its governance, how it runs, and the like. And I think I think we would welcome an opportunity for a conversation of the department, the commission, and ourselves on what are we looking for? If there was a ISO New England governance 2.0, what might that look like? And I know there's other entities addressing that. To the degree, Mr. Chairman, there was a united front on what we were seeking in terms of amendments or changes to their governance process, if indeed the PUC would support that. I think that would be a worthwhile conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Margaret?
I have a question. Yes. So the point about data has been raised a number of times, starting with this conversation when we were talking about FERC Order 2222 and the need for better data. And I'm curious why that data is not accessible. In other words, why it is a challenge, and what will be done to access that data and it completely in the future.
Kara, can I just take a shot at some of that first?
Yes, by all means.
So what we're really talking about is operational data that's almost real time. So we do have smart meters, but that's not real time. It only downloads it so many times a day. So the idea is, particularly for the generators, which we don't have visibility of from the transmission system, to be able to get that real time information. For a good example would be, Commissioner, would be, I see a substation from our control room, and it says there's 10 megawatts being supplied there. Well, that could actually be 30 megawatts worth of load and 20 megawatts worth of distributed generation, but I can't tell the difference. So if something were to happen, a cloud comes by and comes over that generation drops off real quickly, and weird things happen in the system, but we have no anticipation, no idea how much it is. So the idea here is to be able to get that information. We talked a little bit about ways that the distribution companies could try to get that back to the substations, so then we can then read it and we'll put it into our system, so we'll have better system visibility of what's exactly going on, so our modeling can be more accurate. So that's really, and that is an issue that all the utilities are dealing with, is the distributed, and it's not the rooftops, it's the 150 kW and above ones that we're worried about. It's the bigger fields, making sure we can get that real-time communications, okay?
And what is being done to get there?
Kerrick talked and Dan talked about the build-out of going to more substations on the distribution. So a lot of those are municipal substations and more local ones that we don't necessarily go to right now. And then the DUs are working on a plan, I believe, Kerrick, to how do we get that information from the fields back to a sub so that we can get it. So it's a work in progress as we speak. Is that a good way to put it, Kerrick?
I think so. And Dan is obviously a part. Go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, I would add that was the project, I've said phase 2, where we're building out to another 68 substations and reaching approximately 400 new solar arrays, if you will, and storage locations. So we'll be picking up over 400 new locations, new data points with this next phase of fiber build out. So we're working on that problem right now to get that information from its source.
And I guess I would just add, Commissioner Cheney, why wasn't this before? Because I think, at least in my view, team, no one at the time understood exactly how much distributed renewable energy there would be. So there's so many things right now where we have maximized what's possible under the existing system. And you can say that applies to the regulations, so tariffs. So we're bumping up against tariffs. We didn't even talk about the load reconstitution issue. That's a regional issue. Why is that a problem? Because the grid now doesn't reflect what the tariff said it would look like 20 years ago. Similarly, the painstaking work that has to be very detailed, very precise, and involves putting iron in the ground or glass in the air and getting those designed, that takes time, and we're having to revamp the system even as we go. So it wasn't, at least in my view, we didn't say, okay, let's make sure we build a system because there's going to be 400 megawatts in a 1,000 megawatt system. We didn't understand that. And if you recall, when we did the fiber reliability project 10 or 12 years ago, that was a huge risk. That was viewed as, why are you doing that? You'll never need that. And things have turned out otherwise. So I think, so that's why, like, what happened? Why don't we have that automatically? At least in my view, it wasn't foreseen that would be such a huge impact and such a partner, an equal partner on the grid.
Thanks.
Okay, well, we're near or at or a little past the end of time, but if there's something else that you or Commissioner Cheney or Hoffman have questions about, or any of my staff, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Well, maybe I could just offer a closing comment. First, a thank you to the commission and staff for meeting with us. We really appreciate the opportunity to share what the work that we do to keep the grid reliable and secure and safe. But I think on closing, we want to note and thank Judy Whitney for all of the work that she has done over the last several years. Particularly noted is advancing us to the information age as it relates to transacting documents, and just say an enormous thank you and wish her the very best in her next endeavors. So.
We'll be sure to pass that on.
Yes, thank you.
And I want to thank you on behalf of all of us for talking with us today and making it work as best you can remotely. And I hope we see you in person before too long.
Amen to that.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for being part of this. It's been very helpful. Stay safe.
Thank you.